Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. We're joining us on this exceptional panel discussion where we will be looking into Islamic finance in the age of digital transformation and disruption. My name is Nihal Abogatas. I'm a founding board member of MENA Fintech Association, and I have the pleasure today to be the moderator of the session. Just as a means of quick background and to set the background and the tone for the session, obviously digital transformation and fintech is considered to be a blue ocean for the Islamic finance industry. And that's because there's tremendous amount of opportunities available for Islamic finance institutions to embark on in order to achieve multiple strategic objectives such as financial inclusion, customer-oriented financial services, operation excellence, and competitive advantage. Also, obviously, crowdfunding, peer-to-peer financing, payment platforms, smart contracts, and blockchains, crypto are among a very few emerging channels for digital transformation that could be utilized in the Islamic finance industry. So stepping into the panel discussion, I'd love to introduce our panelists for today to discuss the trends, challenges, and opportunities in Islamic finance. We have today Mr. Salman Jafri, the Chief Business Development Officer at Dubai International Financial Center. I'm joined also by Omar Munshi, co-founder and managing director of Ethis, an ethical property crowdfunding platform based out of Malaysia and operates in other Southeast Asian countries as well. Dima Dejani, founder and CEO of Alami, an Islamic peer-to-peer SME financing platform based out of Indonesia. Hello, gentlemen. How are you doing today? Right. Thank you, Salman. Just to delve into, just to set the scene for the discussion, I'd like to first start with a question: what do you feel Islamic finance customers, be it retail, SMEs, or corporates, are looking for nowadays? How have their needs and demands changed over time, besides wanting Sharia compliant products? Salman, I'll start with you if you like,
Sure.
Giving us a little bit of insights from the GCC market and the MENA market, perhaps.
Sure. So thank you, Nihal. It's a real pleasure to be here and to be joined by Dima and Omar. Thank you for the opportunity to join this very interesting conversation. Look, I think I'll answer the question from two perspectives. One, in my current capacity as a representative of a financial center whose role it is to enhance or develop the sector. And then number two is I'll make a couple of observations in terms of being a professional who's done work in Islamic finance, both as a banker as well as a consultant. I'll start with the former. Look, in my prior career as a consultant and as a banker, it was clear that the demand for Islamic finance generally was always strong. It was organic, it was bottoms up. And yet we tended to have a supply side issue. In some cases, it varies by region. I'm not trying to generalize way too much, but in some regions you had better infrastructure from a regulatory perspective and historical perspective for that demand to be met by institutions that had products and services, whether it's on the retail side or wholesale side. And we can talk about how that's evolved. In other jurisdictions, it came later. And we can talk about the innovations in Islamic finance, both in terms of the development of products that work from a retail perspective and a corporate perspective, their suitability and their going to market. But the simple observation is that clients do have core needs. So from a financial services perspective, regardless of whether you're a Sharia client, a customer or not, you would have had over the last few decades needs to finance, needs to fund, needs to invest, needs to take care of your family, needs to grow your wealth. and these needs are core. And I think, summarizing very aggressively, over the last maybe 30 years or so, where we've really seen Islamic finance take off from when Dubai Islamic Bank first launched itself in 1976 or so, I think you've seen Islamic finance rise to the occasion and develop and provide a certain level of core functionality to clients who needed all of those things, right? Buy home, educate their families, etc. Then what we saw is an acceleration of and sophistication of their needs, and Islamic finance has continued to evolve with it. But the long story short is that the evolution has been good, but I think we haven't quite met the expectations of the innate demand. So I say this publicly all the time. Now,
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, please continue.
Okay, so I'll stop there because there's a lot I can say. In my capacity as somebody who is part of the process of developing markets, I will say this. I think markets need clarity, need regulations, they need ecosystems, they need talent, they need capital, amongst other things. And in this area, we have a demonstrable track record of success in conventional financial services, and we're in the process of replicating that in Islamic. The last thing I'll say, just to tee it up for my colleagues in the panel, is to say that at this point, even pre-COVID, and we can talk about COVID also, I think digital has always been a critical piece for Islamic finance to achieve its potential. We've all talked about this for the last 3-4 years, and I think now is really the time to accelerate that conversation.
Fantastic. Thank you, Saman, for a full-fledged answer there. Speaking of evolving needs and demands over time for Islamic finance, from Islamic finance customers, hence peer-to-peer finance, Sharia-based finance platforms, Dima, correct? So you've, I would say you saw that opportunity in Indonesia and have capitalized on it. So how has it worked out? Where did it start? And how are you seeing the traction coming in from the retail customers or institutions joining your platform?
Sure. Yeah, first of all, thank you very much, Nihal, to have me in this panel. It's good to share the stage with Ver Umar and Ver Salman over here. And I think I agree to Salman's point on the industry of the Islamic finance in general, and I think it's really applicable in Indonesia. I think when you're talking about peer-to-peer lending market, I think there's a tremendous potential in Indonesia. I think in a whole like conventional plus Sharia, we've grown so much over the last 3 years in terms of the disbursement numbers. I think it hit over 100 trillion rupiah. So US dollars, it's kind of like 10 billion or more this year. And I think, albeit COVID, the number is still growing. So it really shows the potential in the market itself. And in addition to that, the regulator trying to learn from the Chinese peer-to-peer lending industry. So we don't want to repeat kind of the same problem that they had. So I think it's very healthy in a way. So among the whole peer-to-peer industry, I think Sharia peer-to-peer only comprise a little bit. I think now we have 33 licensed peer-to-peer lending companies, and only 2 of them are Sharia. Alhamdulillah, Alami is one of that. And there are another 10 that is waiting to be licensed by the OJK. So I think this creates more awareness in the market that there is actually something's going on Islamic fintech, and also the comfort from the market. So we're seeing the growth of the retail lenders very fast, especially on the last 2 months after COVID. It's still going 100% quarter on quarter. So I think the institutions as well, we're in discussion with some of the largest Islamic banks to become our institutional lenders. and some of the credit funds as well, and which is interesting, but probably we can discuss in the next topic for that.
Great. I'll get back to you, Dima, regarding the interactions that you're getting from existing Islamic institutions in Malaysia, whether they join your platform as institutional lenders, or if there's any form of collaboration that you foresee coming into play. But I'd love to address a question to Omar, who has been obviously one of the first property crowdfunding platforms, or maybe Islamic fintech, that has emerged in the last few years with groundbreaking results there. So Omar, my question to you would be, are you seeing fintechs working mostly in their own capacity, or perhaps filling a market gap or avoid that Islamic banks are not able to provide for, or are in the markets in which you operate, are they being looked at as enablers for the current existing banks to provide better financial services? So what are you seeing most, and also from Ethos crowdfunding, have you had, where do you see yourself on the spectrum, perhaps?
Sure. Right. Thank you, Nihal. And thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight, as well as our fellow panelists who are really brilliant in what they do. I think this is a very, very important question. And my short, immediate answer would be, there is collaboration, but far from enough. Yeah, so that's the short answer. But there is collaboration, and I think that is highly encouraging, because maybe as recent as 2 years ago, I would say that the environment was far behind what it is today. Yeah, and Indonesia, as what Dima mentioned earlier, has also seen a lot of movement in terms of collaboration and partnerships between banks and fintechs in the conventional space, and also in the Islamic space, although to a smaller extent. And for us in Indonesia, we are focused on impact investment into property development mainly, although right now we are branching out to other areas. And we have worked quite well with various Islamic banks by synergizing with what they do. So typically in the market that we operate, the Islamic banks would want to provide the Islamic financing mortgage, whereas we provide the bridging finance. So in that way, naturally it's a complementary fit. Yeah, but I would say overall, there's still a lot more room. And I think there needs to be a lot more awareness, realization, and focused attention from the incumbents to see how potentially fintech can add value to what they do. And what I typically try to spread to the big institutions that I meet and the individuals who are from these institutions is look at fintechs as an avenue for you to innovate, as an avenue for you to reach markets that you may not be able or may not want to reach. Yeah, but in doing so, we can get more customers in the long run for the banks, as well as help the banks to break into new markets together with us, in a sense that fintechs are an outsourced or an affiliated type of R&D, avenue for the banks and for the incumbents, especially for the large capital market players, for the fund managers and so on. We have seen in a big way in the West and also in China how institutional funds has gone out to the market, aggregated by platforms. Yeah. So maybe I'll stop there for now. Yeah.
Thank you, Omar. I think you made a very important point about the collaboration between Islamic fintechs and Islamic banks at the moment may not be at the same level as perhaps we're seeing with conventional banks and fintechs, albeit that they're still both very on the low end, if I would say. But Salman, why would you think that does being Sharia compliant a deterrent in accelerating such collaborations in the financial in the Islamic finance space? Is Sharia compliant does that play a factor in not seeing enough collaboration on that front? Is it more of a challenge? And that's what I mean.
No, so the short answer is no, but let me explain exactly what I mean. So Omar's point is a really good one, which is, okay, so let's start from the proposition that traditional banks, right, are less efficient than fintechs. Okay, that axiom is true. Then you add to that the slightly controversial, but I think factually correct observation that Islamic banks are probably less efficient on average than traditional banks. Okay, so on the efficiency side, clearly Omar's argument makes sense. If you break down the value chain of onboarding, credit underwriting, risk finance in a bank, it is clear that fintechs can do this better. So within the Islamic banking ecosystem, there's no reason why Omar's argument should not hold water. On the Sharia compliance piece of collaboration, no, there's nothing in Sharia compliance that prohibits or discourages collaboration. In fact, I would say that there are immense grounds for more collaboration, simply because Sharia compliance opens up a whole new avenue of growth. For example, one of the hottest areas everyone's talking about, I mean, Omar and Dima have seen this for years, but if you look at, green or ESG or SDG, pick your acronym, right? This is a market that is absolutely ripe, logically incoherent reason why Islamic finance shouldn't be all over this. It's a natural fit, right? The maxim of green or ethical finance is do no harm. Does that sound familiar to you as an Islamic principle? It's not only don't do harm, but do good. So that's good, one exactly.
Area. Yeah.
So that's one amazing opportunity, which I'd love to hear what the panel has to say. The other area, for example, is in things like alternate energy or things like that, where there are capital-intensive private equity type of investments that are underfunded globally, that have a direct developmental focus, that help poor people, and by the way, large overlap between poor people and Islamic populations, right? So, I mean, we could go on and talk about this in detail, but there's no reason why a Sharia compliant fintech or business should be any kind of constraint for Islamic FI or a bank.
Okay. Thank you, Salman. I think you made great points also, obviously, within the teachings of Islam, which goes very well with, if anything, Islamic financial institutions, there's more ground and there's more opportunity for them and more reason for them to work with Islamic fintechs, and there's to propel growth within the industry as a whole. Going back to Omar for a second, given that your entire proposition is, I would say, a lot of it's very much philanthropic, right? And philanthropy in the West, I would say, is also gaining a lot of awareness. That we see a lot of institutions that are very much into this. Is being Sharia compliant? A kind of awareness that you create around EFIS crowdfunding and your platform. Have you seen traction from non-Muslim perhaps institutions or retail customers approach you on that front?
Yeah, I think, being in Malaysia, the general population is very well aware of Islamic finance. And in fact, in the Islamic banks, I've read reports that in the larger banks, more than half of the deposits are from non-Muslims, because they like the features or they like the whatever specifications of their product. Now, for us, initially when we started, we had rather an explicit Islamic branding or positioning, and we continue, of course, to be Islamic. But right now, we toned down a little bit because we've had even feedback from non-Muslims in the past who said, "I like your product, I like your projects, I like everything you guys do. But I feel a bit strange when you say salam to me in an email." Right? So we have toned it down a little bit, that shows that there are non-Muslims who are interested in the proposition that we have. And however, that use of Arabic terms and religious terms in that sense does tend to alienate a little bit those people who are not familiar. And so on our side, we have started to focus more on the substance instead of the form. Yeah? And that has worked quite well, both with Muslims as well as non-Muslims, because Muslims today are not, in a sense, blindly following faith. They also want to understand the underlying reasons behind it. And the beauty of Islam is there's a lot of logic in what we do, and there's a lot of beauty in what we do.
Yeah.
So that is the part that I think can attract attention from non-Muslims.
Right. Thank you, Omar. Just going back to the digital transformation, the disruption, the technology, the emerging technologies angle for a second. Do you, I mean, if we were to think of the, where would financial institutions today, Islamic financial institutions, which area of emerging technology should they focus on that would propel growth in Islamic finance? I mean, where are we talking about offering more convenience to end consumers? I mean, Salman touched on that point, is that at the end of the day, consumers, yes, they want Sharia compliant products, but they also want to be served well. So is there, what kind of emerging technologies or which areas you feel Islamic financial institutions, be it fintechs or even existing incumbents, should embark on to accelerate the adoption of Islamic finance, or maybe to get Islamic financial, the growth on Islamic, or the demand for Islamic finance on the rise, to kind of elevate the whole, or restyle the whole industry, if I may, if I may use that term. Dima, what have you been doing in your capacity, and what have you been seeing in Indonesia? Are banks speaking to you to perhaps use your platform as a peer-to-peer SME financing arm? Has that happened?
Yeah.
For example?
Yeah, I think there's a numbers of collaboration with the Islamic banks. I think the most sought one, obviously, is for the banks to become the funding, the institutional funders or super lenders, as we say it here, for the P2P. So we're in discussion with two of the largest Sharia banks here, and I think we're in due diligence stage right now. I think it's rightly pointed out by both Umar and Salman that, I mean, they're pretty behind compared to the conventional bank, just to put it bluntly, in terms of the process and understanding of the whole collaboration thing. But I guess over the last year, they really picked up the pace, seeing and learning from the conventional banks, their parent company or the parent company. So I think that's one area. And second is obviously on the what we call it reckoning dana lender, RDL. So it's basically when they when a customer or a user register to the Alami platform, they're automatically opening up a bank account. It's non-interest bearing bank account, and only to be used for P2P purpose. So in a sense, it's kind of like the Wadia product for a bank, but unfortunately, there is no Islamic bank that is ready for that product yet here. So only the conventional bank, which is tragic, because this is really looks like Wadia product. But I think to your questions, like what the Islamic bank should do, I think they need to double down their investment on technology and also the people. I mean, they have probably an outdated core banking services and monolith. I think they need to break it down to microservices and hire a team who can effectively do that and create API, integration with a lot of the Islamic fintechs, because I think we're ready from our side, but then I think for them it takes a long time just to integrate. So the collaboration will start manually, and it will take time to automate such things. And on the flip side, I think what more interesting is, to the point of non-Muslim coming into this field, is that we're also in discussion with some of the credit funds out of Singapore to provide lending for the impact industry. So we just signed a deal with BPJS, the state health insurer, to finance hospitals all across Indonesia. So I think this is something when we talk about the ESG, as Salman said, I think it's really dear to the heart of the Islamic finance itself. So we're eager to double down on healthcare sector. And apparently this credit fund is really interested on our achievement, and they actually open to come into the Islamic structure type of loan with us. And they have zero clue, and it takes time for us to educate them about syirka or mudarabah agreement, because they usually just do the executing loan agreement. So I think this is something that is interesting to the development of the Islamic finance industry.
Right. Thank you, Dima. I have, I mean, looking at the emerging technologies at the moment, we'll take, for example, smart contracts, right? And we've seen several banks, perhaps in the UAE and across the GCC, that are adopting perhaps smart contracts for the murabaha and commodity buying and selling. It's probably proving to be more efficient and maybe taking away some of the errors that could occur at the back end. How do you see the adoption happening from the banks on that front? Is this a use case that you see growing and perhaps actually making a difference in the way Islamic banks operate?
Is that for me?
Yes.
Okay. Look, I think a couple of thoughts. First of all, I think technology doesn't matter, in the sense that it's more business model. So the underlying technology can be a DLT technology, it can be AI driven, it can be both, as long as it's solving a particular problem in a Sharia compliant way. So I'm less concerned about the tech per se. Relating to, I do think that a couple of business models are particularly interesting and mesh well with Islamic finance. So if you look at Omar and Dima's businesses, right? The idea of decentralizing the allocation, finance, and connecting sources and uses of capital in a non-distributive way, let's say to SMEs, is a great example of a use case that works, simply because there are new and interesting ways of assessing risk and providing credit through models that are non-traditional relative to banks, right? So that's a business model question. In the case of Umar, the intermediation of a physical asset financed by capital from individuals, I think makes a lot of sense, particularly where you can do it efficiently. That makes sense. And if it's DLT based, super. And if it's not, that's great too. I think the smart contract angle is interesting only because if you assume, again, people may dispute this, but I made the claim earlier that Islamic finance may be a couple of basis points more costly in terms of effort or paperwork. If you assume that to be a fixed cost, given the nature of Islamic finance, because you got to have these contracts and the flow of money and documentation has to be very precise, you can negate that disadvantage with technology today. That's the beauty. So you can deliver a Sharia compliance wholesale or retail service without compromising on the Sharia compliant aspect of it, and not compromise on the delivery service or the quality of it. I think that's what we have to crack, because you can achieve the objectives without compromising on the principle.
Sharia.
Yeah, I think that's the play, and contracts are just one area, but I would think I would think more broadly about it in terms of business models.
I really like how you put it. It's business models, use cases, etc. Obviously, of the existing technologies, be it I mean the various technologies that are out there. And I put this out there on the table, and I would love to hear your views on it. But obviously, Islamic banks today, or we've got Sharia compliant products that focus on Sharia compliant products that their end consumers or SMEs or corporates have been always seeking. But do you see the emergence of Sharia-based service in the sense, and let me put this forward, in the sense that technology can facilitate service that are within the values of the Islamic Sharia. So let's say with women, we're seeing the eKYC, the digital onboarding aspects being adopted by conventional banks and Islamic banks. If we want to create a digital onboarding or a service line that is only facilitated by women to women, is that, have you seen the emergence of use cases for technology that are within the that serve other values within this Islamic Sharia, and I think people are getting a bit more, they're looking into service rather than products. Obviously products are important, but the way I'm being serviced is something that maybe Islamic banks or fintechs can start innovating around using existing technology. Is this something that you've seen happen or foresee happening?
Yeah, maybe I can take a shot at that. So I fully agree with what Salman said earlier. It's about the business model, right? And that's also what you're asking about. You know, what's the business model? What's the use case? And I believe it's really a matter of creativity and entrepreneurship to see what can be implemented. And one way I like to think about it or look at it, when I think about the future, we can see certain trends happening in the conventional space. And a lot of the times, I get this feeling that this is just so Islamic, or this is what we should be doing first. Yeah. So it's not wrong, in my opinion, to follow if it's good, right? So definitely one area that I think is very interesting, which goes back to the basis of Islamic economics, is actually micro-investing. And why I say micro-investing is Islamic is because one of the fundamental principles of Islamic economics is the circulation of wealth. It does not mean only the wealthy can invest or should invest. Everybody should circulate whatever excess that they have, right? And that's where micro-investing can have a very powerful role to play, where you can have small amounts going out, whatever excess you have every month, or even your loose digital change. There are all these kind of apps coming out nowadays that can help you to micro-invest. And in that way, your money automatically or more easily moves in the economy and makes returns for you. And everybody knows today, we need to make returns. Everybody needs to, make their money work for them, even though it's small. Yeah, and with micro-investing, micro-investing is something that's really happening. And technology is what helps to make it much more efficient and effective. For example, if you can have tokenization in some sense, it can help a lot. Yeah, or just automation of investment through a very intelligent app. So yeah, that is one area that I think Islamic finance should move towards. Micro investing, mass scale, small amounts of money going out for Sharia compliant, impactful investments, and uplifting the middle class and even the lower middle class.
Thank you, Martin. Yes,
Dima, please. Dima, go ahead.
Yes, Dima, please.
Afterwards. Yeah. Please.
Right. Thanks. So I think to add on Omar's point, I think there are a lot of things that can be done. I mean, all the Islamic banks have got the stamp of being Islamic, but then there are some perception also in the market, and it's different per region, that they can be more Islamic, right? So for example, like some of the contract, like the Murabaha, like you do the Wakala first and then Murabaha, but then with the technology, I think you can do direct Murabaha, like buying and then store it. So you can work together with an e-commerce or a logistic provider, and you put the APIs. So essentially, it's your things, but then it's managed through somewhere else, and then you can sell it. You already have an off-taker and all of those things, right? So I think technology really, it's not contradictory with the Islamic principle, but it's actually more on the enabling side of the Islamic principles. And just to add a little bit on Omar's point, for example, like the zakat, right? Every month we get an income, and sometimes like we just forget to give out the required zakat mal. So I think with technology, for example, if there's a neo-Islamic bank, and they can automatically calculate the portion of zakat that needs to be, donated. So I think all of these things can really play a role in developing the Islamic finance in a significant way. And to my last comment, just trying to be very aggressive here. The Islamic banks is pretty slow in transforming itself. Just buy the small bank and just turn it into digital. I think that's one way to drastically address this market. Yeah.
Thank you, Dima.
Please, Salman, go ahead.
Salman?
Yeah, I'll just add a brief comment. You gave the example of, let's say, in your question of, you used the example of women and technology and onboarding. One example of a principle that an Islamic principle that can be leveraged really well by technology, or fintech at least, is this very simple principle of fairness, or to use Omar's example of spreading the wealth and making it, again, retail, small r. I'm not
Yes.
yeah. And I'll give you two very good examples of it. Right. So one is, in Dubai and the IFC, and I can speak to the markets around us. One, financial literacy obviously is a huge ongoing concern, whether you're a conventional client or an Islamic client. And one of the things that we've seen happen as we've grown into an ecosystem of over 200 fintech firms here at the DIFC is you've seen providers get into that business and really educating a new generation of investors about savings and investing. And I think Islamic fintech firms have a role to play in it. Second quick one is this idea of, again, intermediation, but making it accessible. So we have a company called Withaq, and what they're looking at is they're taking, let's say assets like Sukuk assets, right? And using technology to breaking it up into small pieces so retail investors can invest in it. I mean, in principle, you can replace that asset, search and replace, whether it's a Sukuk or anything else. The principle is the same. That's a really good way of spreading literacy about investing and making it accessible to the average person, right? And number two is it's to use Omar's example, it's spreading wealth and prosperity in a way that is quite straightforward and very uncomplicated, right? You don't need one doesn't need a Sharia opinion on this to recognize that it's intuitively good. It's a good thing, right? So there are many other examples, of course.
Yes, absolutely, Salman. I think, and you touched on a very good point regarding literacy, financial literacy in general, and in particular, Islamic financial literacy is something that some awareness that needs to be done on that front. I mean, you have customers, and we've seen a lot of customers also in the GCC. They might be Islamic account holders, but they're not really sure what that means. I mean, they're in it for. I mean, from a retail perspective, and I speak from a retail perspective, but they might see that they have higher profits or less, it's less costly for them, less risk. And as looking at it strictly from perhaps even a non-Muslim, but the good that comes out of the purpose behind Islamic finance and can attract a lot more growth into the industry, I would say, once we've achieved that kind of literacy and awareness. So just before we go, we have around 7 minutes, but we can't not leave without addressing COVID-19. I would say and we've got obviously, what were the implications for you, Dima, Omar, and within given that the IFC is a leading international finance center, what would it do post-COVID to support the growth of Islamic finance in the EU and the region? So I'd love to hear from each one of you the implications and post-COVID plans. Dima, please.
Dima, go ahead, please.
Sorry, I was on mute. So Nihal, to borrow your term, to restyle the Islamic finance industry, I think this is the very soul that Alami is created. And we're looking at the Islamic banks, NPL or the NPF is relatively higher than the conventional banks. So we would like to actually reverse that on the Islamic fintech front, on the Sharia P2P front. So we're been pretty prudent since day one. So I think as a result of that, we grow sustainably and responsibly. And when COVID strikes, we actually have more than 50% of our the industry portfolio is on the defensive sector. So alhamdulillah, we don't have any late payment because of COVID, and the disbursement was a bit down in March to May because of the low availability of funding. But everybody is preserving cash. But alhamdulillah, in June we went back to pre-COVID level, and July it's another high for us. So I think going forward, we're going to double down on healthcare, basic food, and logistics sectors. Because we see these are the sectors that is pretty resilient and I think impactful as well. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Dima. That makes a lot of sense. Omar, from your end, what were the pre-COVID, COVID-19 implications on ETH's crowdfunding, and have you seen investors holding back? Are they and what is your plan for post-COVID-19?
Sure. I think very interestingly, retail was expected to go down where, smaller investors are more careful. But what we saw was that larger investors started to have more appetite and actually became more adventurous. Maybe they pulled their capital out of other investments and they're looking for, something that they feel is more resilient. And in our case, we bring funds or we match funds from wealthier nations and wealthy individuals to Indonesia as well as Malaysia. And these two countries are, fast growth, and Indonesia is even projected not to go into a recession. It's expected to slow down but still grow. Right? So not many countries have that. So yeah, we do see a lot more interest from larger investors who are now more adventurous, where they used to maybe invest only in their own country, plus the favorite cities of the wealthy in the West.
Yeah.
Now they're looking for emerging nations. Yeah, and I think that's an opportunity for Islamic finance because the Muslim world is largely developing or emerging. Yeah, and one other point that I want to add, which I think it's a very significant point that is starting to gain a lot of traction, is to relook at the role of Islamic social finance. Like Dima mentioned earlier, zakat, which is a compulsory tax on wealth, essentially. The amount of zakat that goes out every year is mind-boggling, right? Some research paper that I read from the IDB put it at above $500 billion a year. So that's a lot of money. So if that can be properly and effectively distributed, and not only that, that can then link through fintech to investment products and lending products.
Yeah.
Then we have this really incredible potential to grow the emerging world. Because at every layer or every level of society, there is a solution. And so this is what I see movement here, and I hope that it will accelerate. And because of COVID, it needs to accelerate.
Yes, great. I think great use case, great model. Completely agree, and hopefully we'll see. Maybe soon we'll see also a full-fledged Islamic lifestyle bank emerge that compensates and complements the cycle with yourself and Dima. Salman, on your end, DIFC, what's DIFC doing to post COVID-19 to support the growth of Islamic finance as pre-COVID-19? You've always that's always been a strategic priority, and how's it holding up post COVID-19? Is there any difference or any specific focus points?
So let's break it down. Pre-COVID and agnostic to COVID, we've had growth. So Beehive has been around for 3 years, peer-to-peer lending. Wahid Invest has been around for a couple of years, robo-advisory, VTOC. So that was agnostic to COVID. COVID happens, and we are a government, an arm of the Dubai government. So our objective and role was recognizing that this is a pandemic that disproportionately impacted small companies. We executed and delivered on behalf of the Dubai government a stimulus package in Q2. And so that was a necessary and important thing that we did. Now, from a tech perspective, we saw tremendous growth and uptake because we had a particular package for technology companies, and so we saw a significant lift in inbound business in that space. So that's kind of pre and then current. Now, in terms of specific outlook for Islamic fintech, look, COVID's not done yet. So we have to wait and see how this year turns out. But in terms of our support, we are a unique jurisdiction because regulatorily, we made the strategic decision, at formation, we don't have a separate Islamic license. We don't have a separate Islamic set of regulations. However, to conduct Islamic finance in the DIFC, by virtue of our regulated DFSA, you have to comply with obviously certain requirements. So from that perspective, conversations and engagement like this will continue so that we talk about the opportunities for Islamic finance entrepreneurs like Dima and Omar to continue. We will continue to do that. Keep also in mind that the non-tech market supports the tech market. So for example, NASDAQ Dubai remains the world's largest sukuk market by value. So supporting that is also important for the larger ecosystem. Supporting our, shall we say, brother or sister institutions like Maybank Islamic, which came from Malaysia to DIFC, is also important for us to maintain the ecosystem, right? So we're very bullish. I will consider this year to be a success if we continue to talk intelligently about the opportunities that we have in Islamic finance, and we'll continue to push that.
Thank you, Saman. Thank you very much. I think that's a great way to end our discussion. And I would hope for the audience that they've gotten an immense amount of information regarding the opportunities that could emerge in Islamic finance. There's a lot of growth potential in Islamic finance, and we would love to see more fintechs emerge and more collaboration from Islamic financial institutions with fintechs in order to take in order to see the growth levels that we would love to see in Islamic finance. Just a quick round of questions. Does the audience have any questions we'd love to address to our panelists? Just let's give this about 10 seconds. All right, I think we've had one and it's gone. Okay, thank you very much. No questions for our panelists today. I think it's been a great discussion. Thank you, Omar. Thank you, Dima. Thank you, Saman, very much. I immensely enjoyed this. Have a lovely evening.